doing nothing is the thing you need to do to fix your problems.
All right, we're rolling.
Here we are. Welcome to Backsliders. We're here today with our friend Nick Morton.
There are more cameras in this podcast than there are people.
There's equal distribution.
Very close. It's like a 4-3 ratio here.
Very necessary, for the
I think so.
100 people.
Nick is a very special guest. So.
Totally. You want to get my cross eye from every angle.
Comedy.
Oh, man.
You guys know each other from stand-up class, right?
Comedy,
yeah. We took Jerry Katzman's class together.
Yeah.
And
years ago.
Never been the same since.
No. It's weird because that was a long time ago, I guess.
It's got to have been.
I mean, I haven't done stand-up in 4 years, probably.
No,
it's
really?
been so long, yeah.
Wow.
Do you
Time
still?
is flying.
I stopped doing it for at least a year, and then this woman, Jackie Monahan, called me or texted me and was like, "Hey, you want to do a show?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'll do a show," thinking like, "Oh, I can pull together 8 minutes of stand-up." And then she's like, "Where are we going to do it?"
She was recruiting you to produce the show.
We're producing it together. So, and then all that.
You thought you just had a guest spot?
Yeah. All that came together really surprisingly easily. Suddenly, we had a place, and she got the comics together, and then I was like, oh fuck, I haven't actually I was like, I can't tell her that I haven't actually done stand up.
Right.
Years, and I'd done a couple very specific stand-up things for my kid's school, my grandmother's funeral.
Wow.
But I hadn't, she was 97. So it was like a celebration. I was like, I might as well just make it funny. I have to,
that's so sweet.
I mean, my whole family was
they were in on it, right? They knew, or did you surprise them?
I mean, it wasn't it's weird when it was more just kind of I told stories about my grandmother, and then there were some smattering of punchlines.
Yeah.
But the night before the funeral, we're sitting around having, dinner, all the whole family's together. And I'm like, I'm going to do 8-10 minutes of stand up. And everyone was like, what?
You called it stand up?
Yeah. I was like, it's a roast, right? It's a roast. She was 97. And they're everyone was getting really upset at me.
Wow.
This better be positive. And I was like, oh, and I hadn't really had time to really prepare that.
You didn't work it out. You didn't.
And so I'm up in my bed, trying to be wait, I've got to make this punchline more positive. What's the positive spin on this? So, but yeah, it was, and then I was like, oh, that's.
Did you have non-positive stuff planned that you had to switch over? Were you really roasting grandma?
I mean, it was just, I was kind of making fun of all of us, but I was like, you know what? Yeah, let's try to make this more.
People get sensitive about death. They want people to seem almost perfect once they're gone.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Some people.
Angelic. They're angels now, so.
So anyway, and actually that ended up being sort of a good, I'm so glad that I had that conversation with my family the night before and went up there and really made everything positive because it was nice. And I was like, oh, my kids were like, Dad, you killed.
Whoa, that feels good.
Because my wife wasn't there, so they were so she was how'd Dad do? And they were like, oh, Dad, wow. Dad destroyed up there.
So people did love it, and they were like, thank you. You know what? We were worried about you, but you really pulled it together.
The crazy thing was I was the only one who spoke, which I was
of the whole family?
I mean, people read things, but nobody eulogized her. So suddenly I was I felt the weight of generations upon me.
She's outlived most of her contemporaries, probably.
Yeah, and she was kind of a big deal in her community. So everyone showed up for this funeral, and all of a sudden I'm like, why am I I'm the fuck up child of this family? What has happened that I'm the one that's now here?
Whoa.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
I think the most fucked up of families are generally the ones that are the most outspoken too.
Yeah. Maybe they're yeah, Nick will do it. He doesn't. Yeah. He's got nothing to lose.
He'll do anything.
Yeah, right.
But so I don't know your faith background.
Right,
Did you go to a seminary school?
No,
Okay.
no. I mean, I grew up Catholic, right? So very sort of totally. I mean, I grew up in a very like waspish community where we were like the Catholics. It almost felt like I felt like I had more in common with the Jews in my community than the WASPs, because like the WASPs like never went to church. Like they would go on Christmas Eve or something, and like we went every Sunday to church with my dad, my brother, and I, and my mother when they were married. But then they got divorced, and I remember talking to my dad about it, and he was like, my mother's family actually was very Catholic too. Now that I think about it, I mean, uber Catholic. Like she grew up, she herself only had 2 siblings, but like my grandmother had, 6 or 7 siblings, and her parent, her, who would that be? Who is her father? Her father was the youngest of 7, and, they had like a chapel in their house when they were young. Like my great grandfather was an inventor, and he was like Thomas Edison's partner. So he had this.
What?
He made a lot of money. Yeah, he was like this famous inventor, and
that's incredible.
And so they. His son had like 2 papal dispensations, because they would, give, you could have this like treasury of merit back in the Catholic Church so that you could go to heaven. And, but they, like, my mother's birthday is April 15th. So if her birthday fell on, a Catholic holiday, they just like wouldn't celebrate it. And it was just like tough shit.
Yeah.
You weren't born.
Yeah. So she grew up in a really Catholic family, and my dad was Catholic, and, but then they got divorced, and my mother married a guy who's Baptist. And so they kind of, they go to, they're not terribly, they go to whatever, Easter and Christmas. And
like holidays.
They go to like the Baptist church sometimes. Sometimes they go to the Episcopalian church. But my dad still was like every Sunday at Catholic church. And he's like, it's not my fault I got divorced. But so that was like growing up. And then I went to, and so we did Sunday school. Like we did, it was catechism when I was a kid. Like, so you go to... There was like a group of us Catholics that would get in this van from our school and go and study, I think once a week or something, to get First Communion and then get confirmed. I don't think I did the confirmation part, though. I just did First Communion. But, my recollection of it was that it was mostly about, scaring you about hell. Like that was definitely like, that was the only thing I took away from it.
Did you respond to that? Like, was that something
that like, I think about it a lot now that like, this sort of, hell is what it was like a 0-sum game. I feel like a lot of like the way we're led to experience the world is in this sort of binary way. And that heaven and hell are a perfect example of it. It's like, there are these mortal sins, and if you violate them, you're going to hell. And I think I lived in a lot of fear that I was going to go to hell.
That makes sense.
And, this, especially as like a child, to like teach a child that they could do something that is essentially unforgivable,
Right. Do you remember how old you were when you first heard about hell? Like when, because it's so hard for kids to separate what's real and what's a story. And that makes it even more scary.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I was in second grade. I mean, around that, like sort of studying for First Communion, which I feel like is kind of 6 or 7 years old.
Yeah, I think you're right. I was Catholic as well, and I did get confirmed.
And does like in the confirmation process, do they sort of moderate any of that? Like,
right.
Is there any sort of like, I don't know. It just seemed like, that I still like struggle with this idea that like on some fundamental level, I'm bad. Like that is the thing that like tortures me more than anything else. It's just that like, I'm a bad person. And I feel like that comes from this like Catholic understanding of hell.
Yeah.
So
is it reinforced anywhere else in your life other than your own head? Or
not at this point. Certainly not.
People treat you like a pretty good guy.
Yeah. But it's like I've got kids, and it's like sometimes, sometimes my kids can be so sweet and loving, and I'm like, I just am not worthy of this, which is like such a dark, horrible thought, where it's like this just like perfect bubble of joy comes to you and your kids are hugging you and you're like, yeah, no, I'm really not that lovable, but okay.
I was listening.
You're crowding my self-loathing right now.
Totally.
Well, I mean, it makes sense because like you can, especially in Catholicism, just because I was raised in that too, but I think in a lot of Christian sects, we're taught we're inherently sinful,
right?
Which is bad. Like,
right.
Because Adam and Eve fucked it up, like we're bad,
right.
And we have to do these certain things to be good and to earn heaven,
right.
Or else be eternally like set on fire in hell, which is so powerful and does kind of make you feel guilty for feeling good sometimes because you're like, no, I'm actually bad,
right? Like, yeah, when I feel like sometimes like feeling anxious and that feels like the correct feeling. Like that's the way you should feel because you're facing a eternity of hell and, fire and damnation. So,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny. And so, that was like growing up, right? And then my parents got divorced and I was a bad kid, basically, like from the time that they split up, I had so much independence, that I was just stealing cars and stealing booze and
strangers' cars or family cars?
No, family cars, stealing a family car.
You were really off the rails.
Going for, joy rides or going to meet my friends in places and whatever, hooking up and, then doing a lot of drugs in high school and boozing a lot in high school. And I don't remember feeling that bad about it. All that stuff felt okay.
Normal, maybe.
The only part of it that felt bad was lying. Still to me, lying is the hardest thing in the world. I just feel because every lie is a mortal sin. Yeah. So, and then I went from, I went to a Episcopal boarding school for 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. And that, we went to chapel 4 times a week. And, sort of the centerpiece of that education was your 11th grade religion class where, you studied. The big Christian thinker was this guy named Paul Tillich, who had this, the thing that you studied was this triangle of faith, which was at the 3 corners were, oh my God, they're going to take my diploma away.
You can't remember. There's only 3 corners.
3 corners. I think it was faith, courage, and doubt. And those were the things that you were always sort of vying for your
attention.
Or that was the tension. That was the formula for faith. They were always. It's weird that faith is on there.
Was one of them?
Yeah, it feels like it was.
Faith, courage, and doubt makes faith.
Right? Doesn't make a lot of sense. I must be mixing something up there, but Tillich. Anyone, just please dial in right now with your understanding of Paul Tillich. But that your faith was always vying with your doubt, and that there was this whole need for courage to overcome your doubt to maintain your faith. So, maybe those things are all sort of sides of the same. Maybe it's not about faith, but it's about I don't know, Christianity or something. But the thing was, I could never understand I understood that dynamic. Of course, you're always going to doubt the existence of God, and then you need this yeah, to overcome that doubt to maintain your faith. But to what end? Why? That was one thing.
Eternal life.
Is that it? Yeah. I don't.
That's the only selling point I hear. Maybe peace on earth.
Right.
I don't know.
It's funny. There was this
freedom from sin.
There's this William Golding novel called The Spire, and it's all about that whole courage, faith, doubt, but told through the experience of this like medieval cleric who's trying to build this giant spire atop what is Salisbury Cathedral in England, and like Salisbury Cathedral sits on a marsh, so there's no reason like it should be like the foundation of the church should not be able to support the giant spire that's atop it, but like it does.
God.
And like this this cleric is on this like megalomaniacal quest to build the spire, even though people keep dying, and that like all the evidence points to the fact that like the cathedral will never be able to support the spire, and yet through his insane faith, he's able to get everyone to continue in this act of self-destruction that ultimately succeeds, right?
Whoa.
And so and like that in some ways like that makes sense to me. Like sure, courage, doubt, and faith makes when you're trying to do something insane, like
it seems impossible.
Build a spire on top of a church that's built on a swamp. Yeah, but like to maintain your faith in God, like that seems like a lot of work. Like why? I don't understand. Like it seems like on some level, like your faith in God should be it shouldn't be that hard. It just shouldn't. Why should it be that hard?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I feel like maybe
sorry.
Because to some people, faith is certainty and like absolution.
Right.
Which is the opposite of mystery, which I do think is a big part of God, and also how can anyone have it all figured out?
Right.
And so maybe they were trying to teach. A lot of people are taught like to squash their questions and their doubts.
Right.
But really, like you can have faith and embrace your questions and your doubts.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Or still believe in something higher and not condemn the part of you that doesn't know.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like that whole like the whole sort of Catholicism of it all always felt like, as you were saying, that like, oh, what's the point? Eternal life. Like it always felt like it was never like a practical handbook for making it through life, which
no. I think as a kid you think it's going to be like, you think that's what it is. It's like, oh, they're handing me the manual to life. And then the older you get, you're like, they don't know anything.
Right. And yet there is like this argument that, the whole notion of religion is like one more way that the species has managed to send knowledge down generation after generation in a, method of self-preservation and evolution. And on that level, you're kind of like, yeah, you guys we need to rethink this whole thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
I like that. Go down that road. What does that mean?
Then, then I went to, Georgetown, which is a Catholic university.
Where is that?
It's in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
And, it's a Jesuit university. So, like, actually the Jesuits that were there were sort of like the most interesting people teaching at the school. I don't know exactly why, but like they were almost like Jedi, level. They had this real interesting mix of like life experience and hardcore learning and then like deep faith. And you get into these classes with them where there was no dogmatism. Like they didn't care. They weren't trying to argue on behalf of Catholicism. They were arguing in the interest of, getting to some kind of truth. And when I was there, I studied under this woman named Diane Yeager, and I did a lot of like, there was a course there you had to take called The Problem of God. And, it was a different experience depending on the professor, but she was really hard, and she had us read like a lot of like Christian sort of thinkers, like this guy, Richard Niebuhr and John Bowker, And it was more, the approach felt more practical. Hannah Arendt wrote this book called The Human Condition, which like saved my life when I was at Georgetown, because I got very depressed, and like she had a few like just like practical ideas about faith and like how to sort of it wasn't a self-help book. It wasn't even a manual it was an intellectual thing, but it talked about like, you know, the effectiveness of action in your own life, and that like sometimes any action was better than no action. Like just throw some rocks into the stream and make the water move around you in some ways. And like, that was really helpful to me. I was like, I just need to take some shots. Doesn't even matter where they go or like, you know, it just kind of, it took a little bit of my control out of it. Like, you don't know what's going to happen. So just like jump in there and see. And like, that just got me to like, you know, to just like interact with people socially, got me out of my room, you know?
Yeah.
Even though I was always like a pretty social person, but it just made me like have more fun, like put less emphasis on like, I don't know, like succeeding somehow and just like, you know, taking action for the sake of action. And then Richard Niebuhr had this idea that, the idea that I took away from it, and now it's been 20 years since I read the book, but it was like, that like, God is change was kind of the fundamental idea, that like all the bad things that happen to you are a result of God, but then all this other stuff that then comes in to fill that void or that replaces it or that comes next, that's God too. And so you just kind of have to embrace the inevitability of change in your life, and recognize that is a divine force in your life. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I can sort of get behind that. And then Bowker had this idea that was I can't really even remember what his big idea was. I mean, I did take something big away from his book, but I can't remember really now what it was, which is weird. But like, I remember it was a lot about like, does God exist? And I remember this passage in the book that was like, I know God exists because when, you know, two truck drivers are driving opposite directions on an abandoned road in the middle of nowhere at night and they flash each other their lights to say hello, that to me proves the existence of God. It's just like human kindness.
Oh.
And so I don't know.
That's so sure.
You know,
I know the existence of God is like such an interesting statement. Personally, like I would love to know the existence of God in the entity aspect of it. I think that there is a God in the unity of everything, the symbiotic relationship of everything.
Right.
But like the puppeteer,
right.
That I think that's what I think most people
are trying
that's
to
what
prove.
I hear when I see people saying like, I know God is real.
Right.
Like I know that there's a puppet master and he's deciding whether you're going to heaven or hell. And that part to me is like, how do you even get there other than pointing to a specific text that validates your stance? But your personal experience, I don't know. Maybe I just haven't had this thing that people have had.
I mean, you know, so then I would say like for me then like I graduated from college. I spent 18 years out here in Hollywood doing, you know, Hollywood things. And, you know, drinking and doing drugs, which, you know, weren't that important to me, but they were still like, that was sort of like my recreation.
Yeah.
And then I got sober, and like so much of recovery has this like spiritual component and this whole idea that like you turn your control over to your higher power, you turn your will over to your higher power. And, you know, in meetings, people are always talking about their higher power. And, you know, for a long time, I saw my higher power as chaos, and that like I could just turn my will over to the chaos, that like the certainty that I don't control things, the certainty that like the forces in the world that are shaping it are so much bigger than me that like I just shouldn't worry. Like I can't possibly control what's going to happen to COVID-19. You know, it's like, so like I should just like chill out. And I definitely have found a lot of like peace in that.
Like if you're destined to get it, you're going to get it.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, you've got like some personal responsibility that you can do. You know, you can, whatever, wash your hands and, you know, not shake people. You know, you can, there's lots of things you can do, but at the end of the day, like you only have so much control. But like the thing that's amazing that I have found in recovery is people that share all of that, but then on top of it, they believe that that force is not chaos, but that force is this benevolent force that's ultimately going to take care of them. And every now and then, like when I'm really freaked out and I'm like catastrophizing the very, very worst that could happen, I am saved from sheer panic by my belief that like I'll be all right. Like even in that worst case scenario, whatever, you know, it's all part of the sort of human condition, and I'll be fine. Like I'll be fine. But and that I guess, you know, is some fundamental belief in like a benevolent
Can that include something that maybe you don't want? Like
things that I desperately don't want might even
like
be
our
God
own demise
taking care of me. Yeah. I mean, I think it's hard to reconcile a painful death with God's will. You know, like this is God's will for me. Yeah. Like I think that's where it becomes very difficult to say, oh, this is my higher power looking out for me. But like, everything short of that, you know, you look at people in their worst, deepest, most horrifying crises, and they seem to find, you know, they find peace and wisdom and insight and love and all of that. And I think
the only way to get through it
gives them, and maybe that's maybe there's some sort of chemical thing that's happening in your brain that's enabling you to survive the sort of trauma of losing someone that's close to you. But I think that there is something more poetic happening than that, you know, that like there really is, like in the breadth of human experience, there is grace. Like I believe in grace. Like I think grace is visited on us in the worst of all possible times. And like, what is that? Is that the grace of God? I don't know, but it's the grace of something,
and it's powerful. When you're
and it is powerful, and it's like, it's very, you know, loving and forgiving. And you know, when you're visited by that, you're sort of like, wow, God, life is beautiful. And that's pretty powerful. So,
do you believe in hell?
No.
Yeah.
No, I mean, if there's a hell, we're living it.
Right. Yeah.
If there's a hell, this is it, folks.
Yeah, I think people can create their own hell.
I just
like heaven or hell on earth created in our own minds, kind of thing.
Yeah, I definitely think you can create hell in your own head. There's no doubt about it. But the idea that, you know, some divine force would be clever enough to come up with everything, and yet so dumb they'd invent hell, I just don't. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, and why would you want? The thing that I've been thinking about lately is that, like, if God is supposed to be love, right? If God is love, yet if you do certain things, He will eternally
damn
you. How is it that God's love isn't even as great as like a good parent's love? Because a good parent would never, like, you'd never set your kids on fire, or send them away from you forever.
What if they didn't choose you
in
a lineup of their favorite men on earth?
I'd sympathize. I'd be like, yeah, I did. I raised them well.
You still can come to my house.
I mean, I think that there's definitely, you know, that even not, you know, even not loving you that much. I mean, I just feel like there's also the idea of forgiveness, like, you know, what kind of God could create a human with all these human foibles and then not forgive those foibles.
Yeah.
You know?
Why? Yeah, because if he decided that this is how we were going to be,
right?
Why was that included?
Yeah, I'm the God of grace and the God of forgiveness.
Except for Micah.
Except for that fucker over there.
Micah keeps
who's glorifying backsliding.
Except for masturbation. I'll forgive any sin except masturbation. I'm sorry,
It's
but
just
that's
heinous.
just disgusting.
Yeah. Even though
I would never do it myself, even though I created you.
Yeah.
And all of your pleasure centers. That was just a cruel joke.
So if you don't believe in hell, do you believe in heaven and eternal life in the sense of like a remembered eternal life?
I mean, I guess as an optimist, it's hard not to believe in, some sort of karmic vibration that, continues rattling through eternity. Mm-hmm. But, and then, I'm certainly open to the possibility that, there's something after this that you experience in some completely unimaginable different way. It's funny, I had a dream recently where I died in the dream, and I knew I was about to die. Like, I was like, death is coming in 4, 3, 2, I'm on the other side of it. And in the dream, it was like nothing had changed. Like, it wasn't like I floated above my body or something. I was just like, oh, wow, this is death. It's just the same thing. That's weird.
Like everybody was still around?
Yeah, everyone was still around me, and like...
but they couldn't talk to you anymore?
I don't know if they could talk to me. I think I woke up pretty soon after that. But I mean, I at least, like, in the dream, made it to the other side of the afterlife. And
Was it a natural death? Like you were just
I was like in
I'm
a
leaving.
hospital or something, and
Wow.
I can't remember, I was dying, or there was some reason why I was going to die, and like it was coming for me, and then I was like, I'm dead, and I was like, oh wow, it's just like life.
Not so bad. That's a good little
it's an interesting weird dream,
but like good feeling to
yeah, and then I woke up and I was like, you don't have to fear death, it's just just one more thing in life. Yeah,
it's like we don't fear going to sleep every night, and nobody can explain where we go while we're sleeping. It's
you don't sometimes
thing.
feel like as you're like drifting off, like that you're gonna die?
Yeah, no, I do.
This has happened a lot this last year or two.
Anxiety.
A lot of like
right, that you're just like that last conscious breath is actually the end of your consciousness, like
yeah. But I don't know does that just come with age? Because I don't remember fearing that when I was younger and wasn't thinking about death. You know what I mean?
The closeness to maybe somebody dying.
Well, there was that prayer. I don't know if you guys would say that, but like some families, they'd have that prayer: "If I die before I wake,
I remember
the Lord
that.
my soul to take." Like, what kind of fucked up thing?
I never.
Even as a kid, I was like, "Why would your parents tell you that prayer?"
Yeah.
Like,
now it's all coming back to me. When my parents divorced, my stepmom and her kids would say that prayer.
Right.
And so then we had to start praying, and it would actually scare me.
Yeah. I'd be like, wait, I'm not going to die. Really? Tonight? That could happen?
That's the last thing you want me to say before I go to sleep? If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take.
And I was like, that also doesn't sound nice. Like, he's going to come take my soul while I'm asleep. Like, that just didn't feel like, I'm like, I don't want to pray for any of this shit.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you shouldn't be worrying about that as a kid.
Yeah.
What are you teaching your kids?
Ooh, that's a tough one, because really not much. I mean, I was taking my child to school not that long ago.
Did they go to a Christian school?
They went to the preschool they went to was like Jewish, basically. It was called Montessori Hasharim, and so it was like half.
Is your wife Jewish?
What's that?
Is your wife Jewish?
No.
It was the best. It was the best elementary.
I mean, we sort of sent it there, and I was like, "What does this mean, Shir Hasharim?" And then at some point I Googled it, and I'm like, "Oh, it's a Jewish school."
So there's no interview there where they're like, "You need to be."
No,
Jewish?
it was pretty hardcore, but like it's not like a temple school. It's just like the parent body is sort of like half Jewish and half whatever, and then but they really like taught more Jewish traditions than they did Christian traditions. So like my kids were getting steeped in Passover and Sukkah and Shabbat, and that was great. Like, 'cause those traditions are so old; they're like older than the Christian tradition. So the sort of notion that like you've got to leave a place at the table, for Emmanuel, and but my kids would do it like it was hilarious. They were like, it was almost like they were, Pentecostalists experiencing Jewish tradition in like this super like spooky way. They'd be like, like in the Crucible when they all like get into that like sort of group think, and they'd be like, can you see, I just saw Emmanuel drink. Did you see Emmanuel drink the wine? We saw it, and it was like this thing where like if you saw it, then like you were inside, and the people who didn't see it, they just they didn't have the same kind of magic that you had. It was interesting.
I don't know what you're talking about. So wait, there's a ghost that drinks wine?
Emmanuel, is that God?
I don't really even know that much about it, but I think it's like a Passover tradition or it's a Rosh Hashanah tradition.
Yeah.
And like you make an extra place at the table
for this
so the Holy Spirit can enter.
Yeah.
And like, but in the kid's mind, it became like
an imaginary
a ghost. So they were like, the door opened, did you see the door open? And then they'd be like, oh my God, I saw Emmanuel sit down at the table. And I'm like, oh my God, Emmanuel's drinking the wine. She's drinking the wine right now.
She's drinking.
And I have no idea.
This was at your house, or was this like at school?
This was at school. So they would come home and tell me the stories of like what they were experiencing at, sort of exploring these Jewish traditions at their school. And they would, they would have like Jewish holidays off, and they'd be like, are we gonna, can we like, eat apples with honey? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Let's totally do that. And they're like, can we go to the place where they blow the big horn? And I'm like, probably not. I'm not going to be able to do that.
That's so interesting. Yeah, because they're asking for Jewish traditions, and you guys don't practice them.
No, but we would go like we had these friends who.
Well, they're just like interested, like kids normally are.
Yeah, so they're just like I don't know, they're just like communal traditions. They didn't. None of it felt terribly different,
right?
And it's all Old Testament stuff. Yeah. So it's like and then I remember driving them to school once, and my daughter was like, "Hey, Dad, the Prius?" And I'm like, the Prius? And she's like, yeah, the guy who owns the church. And I'm like, oh my God, I have failed with any religious instruction here.
Do you feel good about that?
No, it's funny. Then the other day, my daughter's now at a school that is, has no religion. She went. So then for elementary school, they went to an Episcopalian school.
Wait, how old are your kids now?
13 and 11. Okay. So my daughter's in 7th grade, and she's at a church that hasn't. She's at a school that has no sort of religious affiliation. It's sort of half Jewish and half Christian, and like. She said she was at school the other day taking a math test, and she was like, this question came, and she's like, I had no idea. I didn't know what to do. And she's like, I realized the only thing I knew how to do in that situation was to pray. And I was like, how'd you learn how to do that? And I guess I've been at an Episcopalian school for the past 6 years, so that's where they learned to pray.
Yeah.
And I would go to...
Do you pray?
No, not in any sort of,
Is that not a tenet somehow involved in recovery, or no?
They want you to have a spirituality. It doesn't mean
I
prayer.
meditate.
Yeah.
I meditate, and like I try to get, I try to believe that that some higher power is going to take care. And a lot of times I do. I do believe that that God will challenge me in ways that will make me stronger, better, more complex. That the challenges I go through only make me stronger.
Refined.
Yeah, that I'm not being broken by these challenges, and that even if I am broken, that I'll come out somehow better,
rising from the ashes,
more resilient.
Yeah. So and that to me is like a kind of faith.
I guess I think about that a lot. Every time I feel like I'm getting my ass beat,
right.
I'm like, I'm going to come out on the other side. So
well, that's growing.
Strong,
growing is so uncomfortable and so painful. There's this quote, I don't remember the quote, but the idea is that like what happens to a seed as it begins to sprout,
right,
to the untrained eye, it would look like destruction, but really it's growth.
Oh, interesting. Sure.
And I think about that a lot because as you're going through really painful things or life is like kicking your ass or tragedy happens in your family, whatever it is, it feels like death. It feels like dying. And, but really like you're beginning something new, which is so uncomfortable, but it becomes more uncomfortable the more you resist it.
Yeah. So, and then, I mean, when I'm really scared, I pray, there's this thing that people pray for there's the third step prayer in recovery, which is, that you basically pray that you'll do God's will, that like, that you'll be an instrument of God essentially. And so, and then I pray, what do I pray for? I pray to be okay with shit. I pray for acceptance, whatever, we're all going to be quarantined and there's going to be no food. And I pray that I'm going to be okay with that,
that it's okay to things not to go your way.
Yeah. That I can live. I pray for
pray entitlement away
to be okay with whatever happens, like to accept God's will, as it were.
Yeah. So your understanding of God is not like this puppet master or Santa Claus. It's more this relinquishing of, it's the controller that's not necessarily influencing.
Yeah. I mean, I see God as like just this, like, this, what is the word I'm looking for? This just like incredible force that there's just no point fighting. There's no point, arguing with, that it's just, unstoppable, and that you have to sort of accept that it's going to take you where you don't plan to go, where you're not comfortable, where you never imagined your life would end up. And then, that's going to be good, that you have to like, accept that that's God's will for you, and that like that it's a good thing, whatever crazy shit it is. And that's not to say that I don't fight hard for the things that I want, and that I don't try to execute my agenda and my goals and everything else, but within that process, accepting that like all the things I try and do, that like I don't understand or control their outcome, that's something much bigger than me, and that like the outcome will be what the outcome will be, and I just have to get psyched for that,
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's I mean, there definitely like there was no real part of me that imagined doing stand-up or having a podcast. Like those are things that like I was not trying to do, and like that I take enormous joy from, that like, and then like, like I look at the podcast, and like it's gotten me into the rooms with all kinds of interesting people that, then I've gone on to do other interesting things with. And that was never the point of it, you know? So it's like, and that's on a very sort of small level.
Of the ripple effects of things
where you
that
just
are unexpected.
don't, like you just can't predict how some chance encounter is going to affect your life down the road,
Yeah. It sounds like, because a Catholic upbringing, at least from my experience, is very like closed minded. It's like, this is the system. These are the rules. These are the things that you do to be good. And it sounds like you've evolved to a very open minded place, very open to change, open to whatever may be, and that it's good for you. Is that?
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, and I've certainly tried to, inflict that point of view on my kids, that they should just be open and curious, and that I shouldn't try to impose my expectations or my understanding of the world on them, because they're going to develop their own understanding, and that they're not me, they're different people, and like they have a whole different experience.
What if they became like super extremists?
I mean, that does scare me. There is that that book, the Philip Roth book, American Pastoral, where his daughter, his daughter that he like loves so much, and he takes such great care of her, and he puts all of his hopes and dreams into her, and she becomes this like radical environmental terrorist, and like,
what does that mean?
So like she
terrorizes the environment.
She wears like she wears like a veil over her face everywhere so that she doesn't like inhale a bug and kill it by mistake. And but then by the same token, she's also like, building mail bombs that are like killing humans. And so it's like, I don't know. Yeah, I definitely like worry like my kids get somehow corrupted by some like radical, inflexible sort of school of thought that drives them towards some like extremist behavior.
Too open.
But, I think part of being open is like staying open, like that is like continuing to sort of, question your own, that you can't have this like fixed worldview, because it'll constantly be challenged by, unexpected events. So
I think that's something we've been thinking about a lot lately. Like faith, regardless of the foundation of the faith, isn't really like grasping something with a closed fist. It's literally just like
open,
always having an open fist and just watching whatever comes and lands on that hand and leaves, and comes and lands on that hand and leaves.
Yeah, and the other thing, certainly in recovery, that is a big thing is, just being present. Yeah. And like, I have this other sort of idea of a divine sense of now, that like when you're completely in the present, like you feel close to the divine because you're not worried about the future or the past. You're just like, you're experiencing the beauty of the day and the breeze, and like, and there's something that to me feels all powerful about that and infinite, and, I haven't totally made sense of it, but like, it does go, so it goes hand in hand to some degree with this concept of a future that you don't control, a higher power that has, plans for you that you can never possibly anticipate. So what's left to you is to really just like drink up the now. And like, that's what I certainly try to do as a daily practice, to just be like, not worry that like I'm going to disappoint my children, but be thankful that like they're a joy to me now,
Yeah.
And that is, that's the best, really. I've found like, when have you been most happy? It's like when you've been completely present in the thing that's happening to you now.
Mm-hmm. Not worrying about the past or the future.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. There is like a good word for it is a divine experience when you're really being present with someone or with yourself or with nature. I don't think we have enough words or good enough words to describe that.
Right.
And I think a problem is when people want to define it and then say that their definition is absolutely correct.
Right.
Because then it's a grasping for like, no, this is God and I figured it out and it's this one way. How can we describe something like that? You know what I mean?
It's interesting, like meditation, at least as I practice it, is this like this practice of getting present in the now, like, and in recovery there is this whole thing of like, as part of your spiritual practice, you can pray and or meditate, and that's interesting. That like that. Meditation as a form of prayer is an attempt to get closer to the present. And prayer as a form of worship is an attempt to get closer to the divine. And are they the same thing? Oh my God, I have solved this.
Whoa. TED Talk.
It's my TED Talk. God is now.
Hey, I'd click on that.
You know, I mean, that's interesting, I think, though, like, I mean, because that is the experience I have in meditation, you know, that like, oh, wow, it really is this like incredibly spiritual, refreshing thing that you can just do anytime you want and get closer to, you know, being present. And like, that does feel to me like a divine experience. So
do you feel like there's certain things that you do that aren't meditation that feel like, oh, I feel super present doing this?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I think that, I mean, playing tennis to me is like one of those things where like when, you know, if I'm doing it the way, you know, the right way, you know, I'm just chasing that ball around like a dog, you know, just like,
yeah,
you know, and I'm not really thinking about anything else. Like, I'm not worried about, you know, anything. I just like, I'm going to get to that ball and hit it back, you know, and that feels very, very, you know, present. That feels like meditation to me, you know, running, jumping into the ocean, like the experience of like that complete sensory overload makes you very present.
Yeah. That's why people take cold showers.
Right. And, you know, doing stand-up, I think, is like one of those things where you're like, so, you know, when you're really doing it well, you're completely present in that moment. Like, you're not worried about the next joke or, you know, how much time you have left. You're just like in this like weird conversation with, you know, humor and the audience and the experience of being there on stage. You know, and I think sometimes like in the, you know, when you're in flow, like creating something like that can be very, that can feel divine, you know, and all those things are like experiences of being very present in the now, and like nature, you know, when you get like out in the middle of the wilderness and like, you know, you're seeing the mountains or whatever, just like the smell of the air or whatever, you can suddenly be like, oh my God, this is divine, you know?
And all of these are just getting rid of distractions, right?
Yeah.
Or focus or having focus.
Yeah. Because I absolutely think that creativity is divinity.
Right.
And like there is something unexplainable that happens when you're able to like tap into that flow and
Totally.
You're finding ideas and you're feeling like connected to yourself and a story or something more. I have a couple questions for you about meditation.
Sure.
What is your, like, do you listen to something guided? Is it breathing?
I
what
mean,
is it?
I didn't really understand. I still don't. Like, I'm not a huge meditator, but like,
You're not a master?
I'm definitely not a master. But yeah, I used, when I first started, I used Headspace, which I found was like just a great, simple, you know, way to teach you how to meditate. I couldn't believe, I was like, oh wow, and it feels great. And like,
yeah, I like that app.
And then I stopped doing it for a while. And then I recently started doing Sam Harris's app, which is called Waking Up, I think. Yeah. Which, you know, is pretty great too. And now I'm really doing neither of those, if the truth be told. And like my meditation happens very, mostly in a sense of crisis. I'm like, oh God, I'm freaking out. I just need to like get present, you know, get present, like, you know, feel your feet on the ground, like feel the weight of your body on the sofa, or feel, you know,
your breath. Yeah.
And then like just doing that is, you know, my stupid watch tells me every now and then it's like 1 moment of breathing can really be effective. And I'm like, really? I never even make it through the minute. Just like the time, I'm like, oh, it's right. And then I'm like, oh, wow, I feel much better. I mean, but
you know, said it to do that, or is it like saying, like, hey, your pulse is doing weird stuff, buddy?
I think it's some app that's built into the phone that whatever. I haven't played with it enough to figure it out. But I mean, I think like, you know, if you've had some sort of meditation practice so that you understand what that feels like to stop and get present, and how sort of counterintuitive it is that doing nothing is the thing you need to do to fix your problems. You know, then sometimes just like, just doing it for even a minute here and there is really helpful to just like stop the crazy.
Yeah. It's crazy for me, like sometimes just noticing my breath. And it was so weird to learn how to notice my breath, like through yoga and some classes that we went to, and how I was like, how have I not done? Why am I having to be taught to like appreciate this magical thing that my body has been doing since I've been born, that can calm me down, that can bring me to the present moment.
Yeah, and then in the Headspace app, they talk about, you know, feeling your breath throughout your body, and that to me is one of those things that I was like, oh yeah, I feel it. I don't just feel it in my nose or in my chest, like I feel it in my shoulders, I feel it in my stomach, you know, I feel it
in my fingers.
Totally. I can't remember what I was going to say. Oh, you know, one funny thing about like being a parent, like I have taught at least one of my kids to meditate.
Just one?
Hey, 50%. You only have two, right?
Like a test?
My son, I don't know. My son has not quite. He's younger, so
he doesn't sit still yet.
He's the second child, so you don't really pay that much attention. I'm like, what's that? Have you taken a bath ever? Has anyone taught you how to bathe?
He'll figure it out.
Yeah, whatever. That's how we know he's walked in. We're like, Waller's here. Someone bathe that child. Yeah, you just like, I can only imagine what it's like by the third child. You're like, what's his name?
I know, that's me. I'm number 3.
Oh, really?
I just figured it out myself.
So like, I mean, it is one of those things where like, you know, you look at your own life. I mean, as a parent, like you just want to like disrupt the damage, you know, and like I had good parents. Like, I mean, I hate to like they were there, they did all the things, like they, you know, they really were great parents, but still like, I'm trying to like be better than they were, you know, and like, you know, and like, I was just amazed, like, that nobody ever taught, like, why did nobody ever teach you how to meditate when we were kids? Like, that just, like...
Well, my parents told me not to meditate. Like, legitimately, that was the devil's work.
Meditation?
Oh, 100%, yeah.
Did they confuse it with masturbation? Are you sure?
It was, like, Eastern influence. Like, anything Eastern influence was definitely, like, taboo. Like, don't do yoga. Like, my mom to this day probably thinks... Well, she does. Demonic. She was like, you don't do mantras, do you? You don't do yoga. Like, you know that behind yoga is like a spiritual element, and that spiritual element is of the devil.
It is unfortunate that so many...
Does that confuse you?
I mean,
Christian
I just
teachings.
Find that mind-boggling. Like, I mean, it was funny because like when you know, when my kids were
the devil is very deceptive. He hides his stuff in good things too.
When my kids were at this, like, you know, they were at this sort of half Jewish school, and then I was trying to figure out where to send them next, and like, yeah, there was this school, this Episcopalian school that really appealed to me, and I was like, I should go to their chapel service and make sure it isn't too like happy clappy Bible thumpy. And I got in there, and the priest or whatever he's called, the prius, the guy who owns the church, he was doing a sermon on the similarities between Buddha and Christ, and I was like, okay, I'm fine with this. Yeah. Like, this is totally, and like that's like the idea that like that Eastern religion is somehow evil is just so like medieval. It's like such like it's like full on, like that just seems like crazy to me. Like,
yeah, I mean, it's very Stone the Witch.
Aren't we both just after the same like spiritual? Aren't we on the same spiritual quest? Like,
right?
My parents would say no.
No. I mean, they just seem like, it seems like when you look at like Jesus, like, I mean, what was he talking about? Like, he was talking about love and forgiveness and service. Like, service is another huge fucking thing in recovery. And that like is a magic trick. It is a goddamn magic trick that like, that you can help yourself to like complete and total presence and peace by helping other people. I mean, that is, you know, that is another way of becoming completely present, is helping someone else.
Yeah. I
mean, that is like an experience of the divine, definitely. And like, it's one of those things, I can't believe I never think of it. I know, like, my daughter was like struggling in school recently with like social things, and I was like giving her all these things that she could do to alleviate her, you know, discomfort. And I was like, read a book, you know, find something that you like and really chase that, you know. And then I was like, wait a minute. Help someone else. Like, that's the thing. Like, go help someone who needs your help. Like, that will make you feel better than anything. And like, you know, that's like, if that isn't Jesus's message, love thy neighbor as thyself.
Yeah.
I think the hang up might be on the words of no way to heaven except through him, you know?
Yeah. That stuff's all fucked up.
So if you're fundamental,
right,
you know, you can't ignore that.
Yeah, I mean, like that's so interesting also, because that's sort of like the other side of the heaven and hell argument. Whereas like, growing up, I always felt that like the bad things I did, whether it was lying or, touching myself.
Oh, gross.
That were going to send me to hell. And then like in this like fundamentalist thing, it's like, yeah. But just accept Jesus Christ as your savior. And that is all. Like, you don't need to do anything else. Like, go.
You won't even want to anymore.
Yeah, you don't have to do anything. You can just like fucking kill people. But accept Jesus Christ. As long as you're doing it in Jesus' name,
you're good.
You're good.
Also,
true.
doesn't the Bible, isn't there like a number of how many people get to heaven?
Yeah, it's very low. It's like a couple thousand, I think.
So why are all these people clinging to like such strict...
They want to be in the few.
You know how many billions of people have existed?
But also it's probably the whole thing of like, like a year to God is what? A minute to God is what? So 10,000 is what?
Right, it's billions. Billions and billions.
I don't know. I think everyone just needs to love each other.
Yeah.
Help each other.
Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely with you. And it's, and it's funny, like when, we're constantly confronted with the, the fundamental evilness of humanity. And, I was thinking about these mass shootings. I know this is like such a dark thought, but like in these mass shootings, there are inevitably like so many acts of just like profound divine human service that are just like mind-blowing. People like hurling themselves in front of bullets and running onto fields to like pull the injured to safety. And you're like, well, you know what? I look at those things and I'm like, I think people are essentially good,
Yeah.
So, and that's, that's divine grace, certainly in those like horrific circumstances.
Mr. Rogers said, look for the helpers when you see scary things on the news, because there are always helpers.
Totally. That's good advice. He was pretty wise, that dude.
Yeah.
So.
How long are we?
Yeah.
I mean, we're done, right? We solved it. We fixed it.
God is now.
God is now.
God is now.
God is service. God is now. So then, like, how do you get to now? You do it through meditation. You do it through service.
Take action.
You do it through action.
I like that advice that you got as a college student.
Yeah,
just take action regardless. Because it is, you isolate and then you start freezing up and seizing up and you're like,
right.
I'm not at the top where I want to be. I can't do anything. I can't possibly look like I'm trying. I can't possibly look like an amateur amongst all these adults.
Totally.
I think the longer I live, the more I realize like everybody is just like winging it.
Yeah.
Nobody knows anything really.
Definitely.
Like even the people who we perceive as being at the top, like they're still winging it.
I was at Sundance. I told this on my podcast.
Whoa, bragger.
Oh,
this is a real humble brag, okay? I was at Sundance. I'm there. I'm getting paid to like be there. To be like, I'm a wheeler and dealer. Like that's why I'm there. I'm there to like identify major talent, schmooze them.
Ooh.
You're like greenlighting projects.
I'm there to like greenlight, like put shit together, like, and there's basically like Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night are like of the first weekend. There's like the big nights, and like I'm expected to like be invited to fancy parties and be like wheeling, like meeting people, like doing all this shit. And it gets to be Sunday night, and I have nothing to do. Like I have no cool parties to go. I have no screens. I have like, and I'm sitting in my my condo, and I'm like literally like looking at this list of parties, because there's always like people generate these party lists, and I'm like, oh my God, these are all these parties I wasn't invited to. Like whatever, I can't even remember what they were, but I was just like feeling more and more humiliated. And then I'm like, well, what if like one of my colleagues walks in right now and sees me here in our condo with nothing? I'm like, I better just like get the fuck out of here. But I had nowhere to go. And I went to an AA meeting.
Like, oh, wow.
And
was there a lot of visitors at it?
Well, it had been like the festival had organized this sober space with the idea that
because it's a big drink fest, right?
Yeah, and like there's always a lot of sobriety there, and people like if you go to like a meeting in Park City, you'll see a lot of like industry people there, and it's I've always thought like, oh, it'd be cool to like whatever somehow meet people there that could help my career. And
hey, man.
Yeah, and so so they had this sober space, and like a friend of mine had organized it. Someone I knew had organized it, I wouldn't say a friend. And I had been there a couple times to support the space, but I was going down there pretending that I was just like there to support the space, but really I was there because I needed to be fucking saved. And I walked in, and I was just so thankful to like. There were like 8 people there, and there was, I don't know who they were. And like, I was just like so happy to have a place where I could go, and so happy that I had gone there. And then there was this like Israeli rapper named Rami, I can't remember his last name, Rami Evanesh, who goes by the stage name Kosha Dills. And he was sharing, and he was like, dynamic and charismatic and funny and delightful, and he told his story. And afterwards I was like, hey, do you want to I've got this podcast, would you do this podcast? And he was like, yeah, totally. He's like, what are you doing? And like he and I went out that night, and like I took him to like this lame party that I'd been invited to, and then he took me to this pizza place where he did some rapping, and then we went to this like nightclub where he was treated like a rock star, and it was just like a weird like night of adventure and misadventure, and it was like completely authentic and like better than anything that could have happened to me at any fancy party in Sundance. And I got to have that experience because I fucking threw a rock in the stream, because I was just like, I got to do something. I'll do something. I can't like, I think a different version of me may have gone to a bar and had a drink, but in this case I was like, I'm going to go and like just do something, like put myself out there and just see what happens, even if I have to do it in a completely humble way where I have to admit I need help. I have to admit that I don't have the answers. And then like the whole world, I felt like I admitted I didn't have the answers, and because of that, like the whole world was revealed to me, and it was like, I don't know, it was just like a great experience in like surrender and giving up on that need to sort of like steer the boat into the winning lane, and just be like, yeah, we're just gonna float along and see what happens, and like it was great,
like surrendering your expectations for whatever
and surrendering your expectations and like your relentless need to project success onto the future and like just enjoy now. I mean, again and again and again and again, I have to learn the lesson.
Right. How many times do we have to learn this fucking lesson?
And then you get trapped and you're spinning out. And like, I think one of the great things about, having a community, whether that's your church or your recovery group or whatever it is, that you can then like put yourself back into to help you kind of get out of those ruts is, one of the things that like I feel like we often fail as a society now that, that we used to have, were these sort of societal institutions that we could return to for meaning and support. And like, it's interesting, like having kids, because like, the schools form that to a large degree. Like, there's, as a parent, you're like, oh, I'm part of this school community. And like, I'll go there to help, to be of service to that community. But in that experience, I also am like reconnected with this group of people that we all share a certain set of values, at least that we all want the very best for our kids, and like, I definitely feel like in this relentless pursuit of, individual success, we lose sight of the profound benefit of a society in which everyone is participating and contributing and enriching each other.
Yeah.
And my name is Nick Morton, and I have approved this message.
Will you tell people how to find your podcast and follow you?
My podcast is called The Drunkalogs, and it is available anywhere podcasts are available, right? And you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Mortonopolis. And my name is Nick Morton.
Thank you so much for talking with us.
Thanks for having me. I finally stopped sweating at the very end of this.
Oh, you stopped? I'm just starting. It's hot in here, guys.
Oh, no, I meant just from anxiety.
Oh.
you made it through, yeah. Thanks for watching and listening. Please rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast so more people can find us and talk about religion with us. Thank you. We love you. Bye.
Love you. Bye.
No, I'm not saying that it wasn't real. I'm just saying that you made me feel bad. Don't try making me a better deal. I'm done with you and I'm fine with that, and that's that.